These two women had like just this really like beautiful connection over the fact that they both use some sort of like a walking device like for mobility purposes. And they both said separately, they hadn't met each other yet. And individually, they both said, and people look at me different and they treat me different now that I have to have this thing. And then if I don't have it with me, then people treat me different on that day. They both said that. And then when they said it together, when they were in the room, the connection that the two of them had to each other was just like, you could just feel how validating that was for them to both be living like their stories are completely different. Their disabilities are completely different, but they have like found this connection and something that has been like really life-changing for them and the way people are interacting with them.
Welcome to the Disability Rights Montana podcast. Today, we have some guests from Ability Montana and specifically the Butte office. And so I will turn it over to them to introduce themselves. My name's Kona, and I work here at Disability Rights Montana.
I'm Kendra, and I, like he said, live in Butte, work at Ability Montana as an independent living specialist. I've been with this agency for about 3 years.
And I'm Cassie, also an independent living specialist in our Butte office, and I have been there for 14 years.
DRM, Disability Rights Montana. Our office is based in Helena. We do have some people working out of Missoula, but it's difficult for us to reach the entire state all the time. And that's why we are very happy that there are other people in Montana also doing valuable disability work and may also have more local knowledge to where they are.
Well, what I think is cool is that we are kind of like somewhere along the chain of things, like a sister organization to disability rights. Both independent living and P&As come from the same kind of structure of federal funding. So it's nice to have this opportunity to connect more with you guys, because we likewise refer a lot of people to you when it feels like it's outside of the scope of what we can help people with as far as like legal advocacy goes. But yeah, so we're a Center for Independent Living, which exists all across the country. Every state kind of decided how they were going to operate their centers for independent living, and Montana decided to kind of split the state into 4 down the middle both ways. So Ability Montana covers the southwest corner, and we have offices in Butte, Bozeman, and Helena.
If someone calls and they have questions and they don't live in our region, then we will refer them out to the other centers for independent living within Montana. I think one of the biggest benefits of a center is that if someone's moving to another state or somewhere in the state and you don't know what to expect as far as housing or services or, how do I get connected to Medicaid, where's the Social Security office, all those questions that you might have, you can contact your local Center for Independent Living, and then we will connect you and support you as you navigate programs in the place that you're intending on living.
Who can contact you and what can they expect when they contact you?
Yeah, any sort of a disability, anybody that would identify as having a disability can definitely contact us, or if you know somebody that does and you're trying to help them. Specifically, Ability Montana is only able to provide services within that region that I kind of said is surrounding Butte, Bozeman, and Helena. But like Cassie said, though, you should still call, even if you don't live in that area, and we can help direct you, or even if they're calling you, like to direct you to the center that's in your area. The way we like to describe it is that we're a resource and advocacy center for people with disabilities, in the sense that we try our best to be knowledgeable about what the programs and services available are. And again, specific to the region, like you said. So like Cassie and I are well-versed on what's going on in Butte and those kind of surrounding communities. But then the people with our jobs and our other offices are able to know specifically what's happening in that area. So we provide a lot of information and resources to people, help connect them to the place that provides the service. And then we also just help people either advocate for themselves in all of the settings of their life, and then do a lot of systems advocacy as well on like the larger level of making sure that our communities are accessible, that state and federal laws that are being passed are beneficial and not harmful to people with disabilities. So we kind of we go all the way from working with individuals up to working at the systems level and like everything in between.
Awesome.
And I think sometimes people don't know if we're the place they should be calling. And to that we say, call us. let us know. Because I think sometimes you may not identify as having a disability, but you are struggling with maybe filling something out, or you can't understand something you got in the mail. And sometimes we sit with that information and it just builds a mountain inside of us and we don't know what to do with it. Reaching out to your local Center for Independent Living really is a space that is safe for you to go and have someone sit with you and help, navigate some of these things that when you have emotions around them become really, really challenging to even try to address.
And I'll add, I guess, that there isn't a lengthy eligibility process and we don't require any sort of documentation. So you don't have to prove to us what your disability is. We don't need any sort of insurance information. All of our services are completely free and just open to whoever comes in our door. Most of the time, we don't even ask if you have a disability or what it is. We just assume that if you're coming to us and you're needing help with something, then it falls within our capacity to do that.
Just to give maybe a little more specific on what people come to the ILC for, like, as an individual with a disability, what are some other areas that people are coming and like requesting help in Butte or Helena or Bozeman?
Well, I would say in Butte, one of the nice things that we have really been focusing on lately growing is having group opportunities. And so we offer several different activities or workshops that people can come to in a group setting to just, for one, build peer connections. That's a huge portion of what our federal mandate is about, is providing peer support in a space to be able to create those connections. So we do provide just a variety of different things. And then within that, then I guess individually, everybody can then identify what specific goal they might need help with. It's hard because there's probably 1,000, but some of the things that come to mind are that a woman that I helped, she's elderly and her vision has been progressively getting to the point where now she can't drive anymore. And her family was kind of struggling to keep up with grocery shopping for her consistently. So I worked with her on learning how to use the Walmart delivery app. And so now, and the whole point of independent living is really about teaching skills to someone to then just be independent, simply.
It's right in the name. That's one of the major goals of the organization.
So it wouldn't be necessarily within our capacity to go and grocery shop for them and bring someone food, but we'll teach them how to do it and figure out what the resources are so that they don't go without. And that was just a really cool way of showing how that can be done, because now for the last 3 months, she's just been able to get her own groceries and doesn't need to have to rely on somebody else to do that for her, or then be worried about not having access to food. So that was an example, I guess, of something I've done recently.
Yeah. And I think that's such a brilliant example because it's happening all the time. And we get calls a lot that we don't always have answers for. I need help moving, I need a moving company, but I don't have the funds to do that. So we get a lot of questions that we oftentimes can't answer. But then there are things like I spoke with someone yesterday. They're wanting to work on a job accommodation. So how do I speak with my employer about, getting my needs met? And so just spending time with people to address one thing at a time. And I think that's what the benefit of a center is that you don't always know all the goals that you have going in, but it can become very specific once you're like, well, I'm having a hard time getting to work. And it's like, okay, well, do you need help learning how to ride the bus? Because we can go with you and do that travel training. I've had so many people lately needing adaptive equipment. So then it's, up to the staff to know, where do you get adaptive equipment? What are the loan programs available? How do you use Montech? Really kind of knowing what other resources would then help meet a need that maybe we can't directly meet, but really get them connected with the right person.
And so what I'm hearing in both those examples is that it's more than just information and referral. You have staff that will go out, and you said you had said that you wouldn't go grocery shopping for someone on a consistent basis, but to go out with them and help them learn that skill.
For sure.
Yeah. And we can go with someone if they're going shopping and go, okay, here you have $50 worth of, to get groceries with. And this is how we're going to budget that within this time. And so doing that with people a couple of times. Some folks do need more long-term support, and that's where other programs come into place, like waiver programs that have staff that can do that. So it's us helping be that first step to really get people to identify what the needs are so that if it's a higher level of help, that we can get them into that program next.
I want to go back to something that you had said, Kendra, about groups. Mm-hmm. So in Montana, as a rural state, we're very spread out. sometimes it is difficult to find your community or your group of people. So yeah, I don't know if you could talk a little more about that and connecting people with disabilities together.
Yeah. So, I mean, the thing that we love to talk about that's been my favorite part of our jobs, and I think Cassie too, but is a project that we started 3 years ago, and we called it Let's Talk Disability Butte. There is a Let's Talk Disability Helena also starting now. We have identified 10 people that are willing to write a monologue story about their life and then get up on stage and tell it to the community. And a lot of it is talking about just different either challenges or triumphs of living with a disability and like kind of all in between that. And that process in itself, we were like, well, it'll be important for the community to hear these stories and maybe break some stigmas about what people with disabilities are like or what their stories are, and then to be able to hear it from them without then also kind of those awkward interactions of if someone tells you something hard about their life, then you have to somehow respond to that, I guess. The peer connections that have come out of that are just like, it's been life-changing.
Yeah.
These two women had like just this really like beautiful connection over the fact that they both use some sort of like a walking device, like for mobility purposes. And they both said separately, they hadn't met each other yet. And individually, they both said, and people look at me different and they treat me different now that I have to have this thing. And then if I don't have it with me, then people treat me different on that day. They both said that. And then when they said it together, when they were in the room, the connection that the two of them had to each other was just like, you could just feel how validating that was for them to both be living like their stories are completely different. Their disabilities are completely different, but they have like found this connection and something that has been like really life-changing for them and the way people are interacting with them. So that was kind of a long-winded answer, and that was just one specific thing, but it's just that project has been really cool, and we're excited that it's happening now in Helena.
And I think the thing that we found is the most valuable is that over the last 3 years, we now have like 25 people or more that have done the show. And because they've done the show, they've found their voice and then they use it in all these other ways. I mean, you're just watching people know that like you have something important to say, you're valid, you belong. Like the confidence it's instilled to then also give it away to other people. It's everything. It's everything to have your voice be elevated.
And I guess to just keep talking about this whole concept of peer support, when independent living centers were founded, the independent living movement was led by people with disabilities that knew that they wanted better for their lives, and the programs and the services they needed just didn't exist. And so they created it themselves, basically. And so then it was written into the legislation that independent living centers have to hire their staff. A majority of their staff have to be people living with disabilities. So as a whole like movement and center, it is still disability led. So the whole concept basically is peer, from kind of even just from the staff that work at the centers to then us creating these like relationships between other people that are maybe all like consumers of ours, or between staff and consumers. And so some of the other things that we've offered at our Butte office are like we have a women's group that does more crafts and activities. We have a women's group that's really focused on talking and kind of like
emotional support.
Yeah. And those are all comprised of different women throughout the community. Helena has a women's group that also does kind of some like crafts. They have a men's group here too that's led by a male staff person. The men's group does a lot of cool like outdoor activities where his whole focus is creating that same connection, but then doing it in a space, in a setting where they feel comfortable to just be themselves, I guess. And then that kind of like by planning different activities out in the community, then we're not forcing these connections to happen, but they happen organically by just providing a space for people to gather, I would say. And Butte, it's been easy because we just bought a new building, and it's so beautiful and it's so fun to be in that people have just been coming and showing up. And I think that's like the part of being a center, and like we've talked about this so much, is that it is just a space for people to gather. And so like a huge part of what we're doing is just trying to open those doors and get people to come in.
And kind of honor like that we don't always know what the best thing is, but that we're always adapting and moving those peer groups to meet a need that people express. And so you're right. when you live outside of our office area, though, how can we connect? And so I think after COVID, really being able to have, Zoom and all those other platforms that came to be, we had some really good peer groups that were happening over that. And some of that kind of has fallen to the wayside, but it's still available to us to do it. And those are things that we're always ready to engage in, because we do know, people are lonely. And they're not connected. And so how do we build community? We have another program in Butte that we call Snow Buddies, that we try to match folks who need a volunteer to help shovel their sidewalk up. And I think I've learned more about loneliness through that project than anything, just about not having family, not having neighborly support. When you don't know who your neighbors are, you can't ask them for help. And so we all need somebody else.
And maybe we can talk, just while you mentioned it, Snow Buddies. What is that program specifically, and how would I know if I'm a person that might need that? Yeah.
So a number of years ago, I became very passionate about walkability. And the more I became passionate about that, the more I was like, well, you can't even leave your house if you can't shovel or your neighbor can't shovel. You're already isolated in the winter, but now you're more isolated. And so a group of service providers in Butte got together and were like, this seems like something that we could try to help facilitate. And so we kind of established Snow Buddies, and then Ability Montana kind of took the lead on doing the matching. So you would be eligible for that program if you were elderly or disabled and don't have a friend or family member that can shovel for you and need that support. Now,
and is that available in all three?
No.
Okay.
Well, but our coworker one of our coworkers in Bozeman had been working with the city there, and the city of Bozeman actually developed their own program. They called it Snow Angels, but it is available in Bozeman, but it's not facilitated through Ability Montana. So the details of it are
for them.
Yeah.
That seems great. Maybe I can get Butte Silverbow to take over Snow Buddies. It's really, really hard to get volunteers. And I'll say that knowing that people are good and they want to help, and also people are busy. And so it is difficult to find volunteers, and it's kind of a dangerous activity. People need to be really careful when they're shoveling. People have heart attacks, and it's slips, falls. And so it's kind of a big ask as well. And it's interesting because I never give the phone number of the Snow Buddy out, like the person that's volunteering, to the person that's receiving the service, because I get the phone calls and I know that people call right away in the morning, like, no one's been here to shovel yet. I'm like, oh yeah, that's because they have, to go to work, and they have a family and they have a job. And so just like with any volunteer program, you have to hold loosely to the results.
Shoveling snow never happens at like the perfect time.
No.
Yeah.
Well, and it's just something, we'll get phone calls from people and they're like, I live in Arizona and I'm moving to Montana. And I'm always just like, can you tell me more about that move? Like, is it a family move? Are you just interested in living here? Because those climates are so different. And I don't think people realize just how isolating the winter can be.
And that's, the amount of stories though that we hear about people where so it's not even just isolation if you live in a rural place, but even living within our cities, if you can't leave your house, or if you can't even get down the sidewalk or get off the bus, then like you're still stuck. And you probably in some ways feels even more isolating to be in the middle of a city and not be able to go anywhere, because you physically can't navigate what the snow and ice does to our sidewalks. So,
and I think the thing that's been really beautiful about being able to do this project is that it gives us so much more eyes on the streets to then advocate at the city level. And so recently in Butte, we have requested that they report a sidewalk on the website, so that if a business or, an area along the bus route that you cannot get by because it hasn't been shoveled, you can then report that sidewalk, and then the city can address that concern instead of just getting mad because someone doesn't shovel, right? There's you can't change behavior. We can't as citizens, but perhaps, the city coming out and having that conversation would affect change.
And you're describing this partnership and sidewalks are maybe a simple example, but my understanding is typically a sidewalk is a right of way. It's like city property, but then there are these municipal laws that require the private landowner and, right behind the sidewalk to clear it by a certain time. Yeah. And so there is a partnership there. It's great that you have this conversation going with these various cities. Does Helena, so you mentioned Bozeman and Butte, does Helena have the Ability Montana here? And Helena have that?
I think they're interested in it. It's a lot to take on though, and I mean, knowing that Bozeman did it through their city government, I wonder if that's something that Helena could, because I think it goes along with ordinances. So if you're looking at the ordinance and you're saying you have to shovel the sidewalk, but you also can't do that physically, they have to account for that accommodation. The city does. And so, I mean, I think in Butte, we're kind of just doing them a favor, by having started Snow Buddies, really, because it's like, okay, we'll do our best to try to match people.
Well, this has been great. Thank you so much for coming by. Any final thoughts or?
No, thanks for having us.
Awesome. Well, thanks for joining us today. If you have any questions about independent living centers, let us know and we can get you hooked up with some great folks. So thanks for being here.
Thanks, Gona.
Thanks.